The nerdy Hallisimmer.
Hey guys, a warm welcome back to my channel. It has only been a couple of days since the release of the X-Plane 12 beta. There has already been one update provided for the core simulator, and one by one scenery as well as aircraft developers port over their software from X-Plane 11 to X-Plane 12. As far as helicopters are concerned, we already do have an X-Plane 12 version of the H125 or AS350 by Cohen Sim. V Skylabs also already updated their product line for the new sim. And Philip Ubbens has released a new version of his SA315b Lama. This is called a paid upgrade, so there will be no discount for previous owners of the X-Plane 11 version. So I decided to make a short review flight for you guys and have a look at the flight model changes. Funny thing, as you can see, we have a Jet Ranger in our cockpit. So we have just been merged with a static aircraft. This gives me the opportunity to show you an improved on feature of the X-Plane map. When zooming in on your aircraft and left-clicking it, you get into slew mode. Now in the new sim, they seem to have increased the resolution of the slew mode, so you really can fine position your aircraft. Now this was really hard to do in X-Plane 11. You could easily displace the aircraft for a couple of 100 feet if you weren't careful. The 3D modeling of the Lama is exquisite as it already was in X-Plane 11. And do keep in mind that this video was recorded on an older machine, so if you happen to have a better setup than me, I'm sure you will get much more out of X-Plane 12 visually than what you can see here. We can open and close the doors from the inside as well as from the outside. There's the possibility to add a bubble door or remove doors altogether. Raising my collective collectively changes the pitch of the main rotor blades, and if I use my pedals you can see the pitch of the tail rotor blades change as well. Let's have a quick look at the outside air temperature, which is 10 degrees Celsius. We're flying in real weather today, and believe it or not, there's no wind at Telluride Airport, which was the highest commercial airport in the United States at 9,078 feet. Current QNH is 3035. For our performance charts and the correct setting of the Collins pitch indicator, we will need our current pressure altitude. Let's fill in this formula. Our field elevation of 9,078 feet plus standard atmospheric pressure, or QNE, which is 29.92 inches of mercury, minus our current QNH of 30.35 inches of mercury times 1000. Now that the current QNH is quite a bit higher than the standard atmospheric pressure, we can see that the second half of the formula gives us a negative value. That means we have to subtract 430 feet from 9,078 feet, giving us a pressure altitude of 8,648 feet. So with today's high outside air pressure and moderate temperatures, we could expect a slight increase in the performance of our helicopter. For a more detailed explanation on how to calculate pressure altitude, feel free to check out my video Lukla to Everest Base Camp, Helicopter Performance. Alright, if you hate math, there is an easier way. Simply set your altimeter to standard atmospheric pressure to 9.92 inches of mercury, and it'll show you your pressure altitude. As you can see, it's pretty close to what we've calculated, give or take a few feet. Now, should you use this method, it is very important that you set your altimeter back to the current QNH, or else you will get false altitude readings. Muy peligroso. As you can see, we are loaded up to the rafters, close to maximum takeoff weight. Now to set the Collins pitch indicator. First, we have to turn the outside ring of the instrument to align our outside air temperature of 10 degrees to our pressure altitude. We'll have to convert to meters. 8,648 feet times 0.305 is 2,600 and something meters. The click spots are a little counterintuitive, so just use the mouse wheel if you have one. There we go. Now we can read the density altitude of about 3,000 meters on the lower right hand side of the instrument. Now let us set our little reminder bug to 3 on the innermost scale, which is then indicating our collective pitch limit of 95%. From the top scale you can then find the maximum weight for an out-of-ground effect hover, which in our case would be 2,200 kilograms. If you do not want to bother with this, that's perfectly fine. The instrument is automatically set by default. We are looking at the hover ceiling chart in ground effect of the Lama. Just enter the chart on the left hand side at our pressure altitude of 2,640 feet. Draw a straight line to the right until you hit the 10 degrees outside air temperature, and from there straight down. It reached 2,300 kilograms, which is way beyond our maximum allowable takeoff weight, so we should be good for an in-ground effect hover. Let's do the same thing for the out-of-ground effect hover. Pressure altitude 2,640 feet on the left, straight line across to the 10 degree line, and from there down. As our pitch indicator already told us, our maximum weight for an out-of-ground effect hover at this altitude would be 2,200 kilograms. Great news, the Axis viewer that you know from a lot of my videos seems to be compatible with X-Plane 12 right out of the box. Simply copy the plugin from the X-Plane 11 to the X-Plane 12 plugins folder. The Lama also comes with a head shaking plugin, which is kind of nice. However, it might completely throw off your flying, so you can deactivate it like this. The aircraft is still shaking a bit, as you can see, probably a performance issue. You can remedy that by increasing the numbers of flight calculations per second. I have no idea who's or what's making these sounds. Let's set it back to 4 maybe. I know I already did 2 videos on the Lama, both showing the complete startup procedure. I'm gonna go ahead and do it again anyway, because this, for instance, a new beeping sound toggled by the battery switch, not present in the X-Plane 11 version. All circuit breakers are in, and they're unfortunately not modeled as of yet. Make sure rotor brake is off, and let's test the caution warning lights. Still seem to be hardwired together, unlike in the real aircraft where you would have to press each and every one of those lights separately. Fuel pumps to on, priming the engine. Wait for 20 seconds. There is an addition to the main panel. This seems to be the control unit of the searchlight. Okay, 20 seconds have passed. Time for startup. Unguard the start switch. And make sure that the fuel lever, that's the white one, is in the idle position, so all the way down. Red lever to on. I did stop my blah blah there for a second so you could enjoy the reworked sound of the Astazoo engine starting up. The mix is quite a bit louder than it was in XP11. Louder does not necessarily mean better, but we do hear more detail. And I have to say that I like this sound set, it's pretty immersive. Just 2 things I've noticed. The engine start switch has some kind of epic reverb set to it, which is rather weird. And I could hear the loop in the engine sound. Maybe they could take a longer sample. But that's very nitpicky. I'm slowly increasing throttle now and wait for the rotors to engage. There they go, spooling up. And I have to say I'm still pretty crazy about that little shaking of the rotor RPM needle on the dual tack. Now listen to the sound of the rotors. Yep, the sound has been greatly improved compared to the XP11 version. It's just a joy to listen to. We want to make sure that the fuel lever is all the way forward, and then we're going to finally take it off the ground. Frame rates are okay so far. I do tend to get quite a few stutters in XP12. However, overall frame rates seem to be constant around 30 frames per second, which after all is enough to fly a helicopter. This is not just going to be an aircraft review on the SA315b Lama. I'm also going to take a second look at the helicopter flight model of XP12. The Lama flight model for XP11 was a little underpowered when it was close to maximum takeoff weight. Let's see if that has changed. We are heavy, however, according to the flight charts, we should be able to hover in and out of ground effect without a problem up here. In Sudaviation's helicopters, the power pedal is the right one, anticipating right pedal and right cyclic. Oops, a little lateral sliding here, but we're up in the air. Notice that the helicopter lifts off with the left skid first, just like in the real world. Alright, let's turn it around and taxi to the runway. I'm still pretty happy about the XP helicopter flight model. It feels distinctly different to the XP11 flight model. I find it a little hard to describe, but it seems like I can feel that the aircraft is actually moving through air. Or with other words, it seems like I can feel the ground cushion, if you know what I mean. And with every revolution of the rotor blades, the helicopter seems to fight to stay airborne. They are a lot more stable than in XP11, which a lot of you guys will like, and some of you guys will not. As we gain a little speed, you can see the helicopter sinking, and we have to pull in a little collective. Vice versa, if you get back to a stable hover, you will have to decrease collective a little bit in order not to climb. This is an actual characteristic of helicopters that is not modeled in so many flight simulations, so I'm very stoked about this. The only simulation that comes to my mind that models this is actually Polychop's SA315b Gazelle in DCS. Even though they definitely overdid this, you find yourself oscillating quite a lot in altitude while hovering. Oh yeah, and Dodosum's 2064 FSX also modeled this. Take a look at our Collins pitch indicator. You can see that we are close to our collective pitch maximum there. Still got a little bit of room. However, we're close. Another very nice detail is the oscillation of the needle on the airspeed gauge there. Now you can see as I come to a halt that the aircraft is actually climbing, so now I need to lower my collective. That was what I was talking about earlier. There you can see it. Let's set it down on these numbers here. It is very easy to land. As I said, helicopters are very stable in XP12, and if you can hover a helicopter in X-Plane 11, you definitely can do so in X-Plane 12. Seeing as the helicopter hovers the right skid low, the right skid will also be the first one to touch the ground. It's always a little hard to judge how close you are to the ground actually, so just take it slow. Once the right skid is down, the left one follows. It's just the opposite of how the aircraft lifts off. Notice how in the replay the helicopter actually has to be hovered a little bit nose low to stay above the same spot. Now if you go back to the beginning of the video, you can see in our tab that our center of gravity is actually quite a bit forward of center, so that seems to check out as well. As far as I know, it is admissible in the Lama to pull 100% pitch for short periods of time during takeoff and landing. The collective pitch limit indicated by the reminder bug on the Collins pitch indicator is for the continuous operation of the helicopter. Once we gain forward speed and enter effective translational lift, we should get more headroom on our engine power. I will try to follow what is called the height velocity diagram. This basically means that you get a certain amount of speed before you climb away. Thereby, in case of an engine failure, you do not end up too high and too slow, or too low and too fast for an auto rotation. See that even as a seasoned veteran of helicopter flight simming, I'm still struggling a little bit adapting to the new simulator and the new flight model. Now that we are climbing out more effectively, notice how the needle of the Collins pitch indicator has lowered quite a bit, even though I did not move the collective. The trim ball is not of great help in the Lama. Anyway, you can ignore it, especially at slow speeds. Just keep your nose straight. There is an ongoing debate on the support forum for the Lama about the pricing policy. The Lama by Philip Ubbens for X-Plane 12 comes as a paid upgrade. There are no discounts for previous owner of the aircraft for X-Plane 11. I do understand that some customers are not too happy with that move, especially if you consider that quite a few developers apparently follow a different policy here. Skylabs has updated its aircraft for free. CoinSim and JRX Design plan to do the same thing. However, a few things that you need to consider. These developers do not get rich by providing us with their helicopter simulations. They just do not. Helicopter simulation is a very tiny niche inside the flight sim community, which in itself is not that big to begin with. As we're cruising along at a meager 17 knots, I'm going to check for our VNE speeds. I would love to see that clipboard showing all of the important performance charts of the Lama. We only have the VNE speeds and the power check chart. Enter the chart at the right hand side at 3000 meters of density altitude. Track left until you hit the graph of our current gross weight, which is 1950 kilograms, then move upward and read about 95 knots VNE, so we're perfectly safe with our 70 knots here. Also, that play card clipboard can now be folded back onto the panel. Back to the pricing issue. I think if you put the revenue that you can expect to generate through a small target audience of people who actually go and buy a helicopter flight simulation for X-Plane in perspective to the countless hours of work that you need to put into the development, it probably isn't even close to being profitable. Just think about the sound. They need to go someplace where they have an actual original SA315b Lama that is operable. This is not an easy thing to do nowadays. Then you need to go there and actually record it. If you do it yourself, you need at least some kind of semi-professional recording equipment. Then you have to edit that audio and mix it and put it into a format that the simulator can work with. That's a lot of work just for the sound side of things. And it doesn't end with the release of the product, of course. Every time Laminar Research decides to change something in the core simulator, that might just break your product. Then you will spend more hours on fixing those problems again for your existing customers. So maybe now you can imagine that there's a lot of work that goes into a product like this. And you do not get the same aircraft that you had with X-Plane 11. The flight model is different. The sounds are reworked. There are quite a few new features. What I would like to see though is the correct simulation of the circuit breakers, as well as the possibility to check each caution and warning light separately, just like in the real aircraft. Anyway, maybe the best way would have been to offer at least a small discount for existing customers, just as a gesture. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. We are turning back towards the airport now, and we're gonna land this thing. Very nice to see here how the runway follows the terrain. Judging from the original helicopter's performance charts, Ubbens' version so far seems to be quite accurate. The XP11 version of the Lama had difficulties taking off at max gross weight, so it was a little underpowered apparently. You can see that this issue is fixed with the XP12 version. We don't see that problem here. I really do like the sound. You do hear that little amount of blade slip coming into the sound mix every now and then. Another great thing that I want you to take note of is once the helicopter goes out of effective translational lift, it starts to rapidly descend. Of course, we do not have that extra lift, right? Which then in turn requires you to pull in quite a lot of collective to control your descent rate. This is perfectly realistic behavior for a helicopter, and it is modeled in Bell Simtex Huey for DCS. And I was caught a little bit by surprise here on how strong that effect is modeled. In most XP11 helicopters, this was either not modeled or hardly noticeable at all. Probably because the helicopters tended to float too much anyway. The fact that my X-Plane 11 trained muscle memory did not anticipate this is a good sign that this is actually a new and added feature of X-Plane 12 or the Lama or both. I don't know. It happens right now. You can see me drop. And as I pull in collective, I'm a little slow to increase right pedal to keep directional stability. So to sum it up, I'm still pretty overwhelmed by this new XP12 helicopter flight model and the Lama, which obviously makes very good use of it. If I would want to question something, I could say that every helicopter that I've flown in X-Plane 12 so far handles and feels very similar. The differences in handling characteristics are not as distinct as they were in X-Plane 11. However, I will wait what the pros have to say about this. If you know what you're doing, helicopters in X-Plane 12 are very easy to fly, very easy to hover, very easy to land. Much more so than their X-Plane 11 counterparts. Now this might throw some purists off that seem to think that the more difficult an aircraft is to control in a simulator, the more realistic it must be. Now this is not necessarily true, of course. I'm still adapting, as you can see. Once my right skid touches down, I'm lowering the collective a little bit too quickly for my taste. Alright, let's roll off the throttle then. After 30 seconds, we can shut down the engine. That's a great thing about the Aerospatiale or Sud Aviation helicopters. You do not have to wait for 2 minutes like you would have to in a Hughes or a Bell helicopter. The 2-minute cooldown phase, as I understand, is there to prevent oil coking. However, I don't know why this does not apply to the French-built helicopters. Maybe one of you guys can enlighten me there. I'm gonna open up the door, check for the stereo panning and the mix of outside and inside ambiances. Pretty well done. I wonder if it is mixed in surround as well. Another great thing about the Gazelle and the Lama is that you can actually stop the rotors without killing the engine. Once the rotor RPM is below 1,500, you can activate the rotor brake. Try to make one rotor blade stop right at the 12 o'clock position. Now this is to prevent that one of the rotor blades comes to a halt directly above the hot engine exhaust and gets damaged. There's a weird change in lighting here. Did you see that? It goes back to normal in just a second. I don't know what that is. If you fail to stop the rotors in the correct position, simply click on Turn Blade to Front within the Lama menu. Okay, shutting down the engine and all electric consumers. Once the rotor blades have stopped, we can also switch off the anti-collision lights. Alright, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed our little flight and my review of the SA315b Lama for X-Plane 12. If you did, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll be seeing you around next time. See ya!